Greetings. In this video, we're going to revisit the question of which language has the strongest case for the pews at First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, with the focus mainly being on Hebrew and Arabic. Now, when I make videos on the pews, I often get a reply from someone about how I'm beating a dead horse. So I want to make clear that just a little over 2 months ago, the We Woke Now channel put out yet another video on the pews, arguing that the case for Hebrew is stronger than the case for Arabic. And I hadn't yet gotten around to commenting on that video, until now that is, so I'm not just harping on an old topic by myself. Rather, I'm responding to something that proponents of Hebrew on the pews have themselves been recently promoting. And the main focus of this video will compare Kelly's proposed Hebrew reading to a couple of proposed Arabic readings. What Kelly has proposed is that a pew has soli treo script, and with text that reads Yisrael Yom, which Kelly translates with a bit of an apparently unwitting Germanic syntax as Israel's day. And the proposed spelling of Israel has it spelled with 5 yods and a zayin, but no center aleph. Moreover, his proposal also quietly has the word yom being written with a regular mem rather than a mem sofit, which is to say a final mem. And we'll get into this in more detail as we go on. Moreover, the good doctor's reading will be compared to 2 proposed Arabic readings, one of which posits that La ilaha illallah, which is to say there's no God but God, or there's only one God, that appears on a pew, and yet another proposal which proposes that Ilahinas appears on a pew, Ilahinas meaning the God of mankind or the God of humanity. And Ilahinas is proposed for the same pew that Kelly proposed the Hebrew reading for. Now, to set the tone, I'd like to begin with a clip of something Kelly said in another show, and I'll share links to all my sources in the video description. But this first clip will run for about 35 seconds and fair use.
He wrote about. Right? Not the history that, many want to superimpose on us, with this whole nonsense about, one group, some people want to try to say that pews are paying homage, to Shahada, while others want to say that it's Quran passages on the pews, which I can emphatically, which I've already done with the main pew, prove that it's not going letter by letter, not this nonsense of trying to superimpose writings on the pews. And
all right, I wanted to interject here because I sensed a bit of irony there, as the good doctor complains about superimposing writing on the pews, but it'd actually be helpful if he tried to highlight the relevant pew itself to see to what extent his proposal fits. Whatever the case, as for going letter by letter, as he put it, the case for Arabic has done precisely that, right? This is discussed in my video titled, Has the Case for Arabic Been Transliterated?, which I'll also link to in the video description. But that aside, let's play one more quick clip from that show, and this one will run for slightly over 20 seconds, and again, fair use.
I'm going to share some of the professors, some of their comments, not just one, not just 2, but I'm going to show multiple professors that makes it clear on the very pews that are in question that it's not Arabic, no matter how many want to twist things around and try to make it whatever they want it to be. They're going to make it clear that it's not Arabic.
All right, real quick note on certain professors saying that they don't see Arabic on a particular pew. Just to be clear, I myself was the first to show as such. I was the first to bring out different professors who denied or said that they didn't see Arabic on the pews, right? I showed the opinion of Mohsen Goudarzi, as well as the thoughts of Dagli. And Dagli, or Dagli, but Dagli was part of the team that produced the wildly popular study Quran. However, if all it takes to rule out a language is professors saying that they don't see that language, well, then by that standard, Hebrew falls as well. You see, Richard Saracen said that he didn't see Hebrew on the pews. Geoffrey Khan, the Hebrew chair at Cambridge, who's among the best suited to discuss this question, said that there was no Hebrew on the pew he saw, which is the pew that Kelly proposed Hebrew for. And most humorously, Kelly and Brown themselves trotted out a secret scholar whom they claimed was as prominent as Geoffrey Khan, and the email they showed from that secret scholar has him declaring that he did not see any Hebrew on the pews. So if Arabic falls by this standard, then so too does Hebrew. But the good doctor isn't using even scales. Moreover, as I'll touch on in this video, Kelly has held these languages to different standards. A proposed Arabic reading has to meet a strict standard, while a proposed Hebrew reading, or Ge'ez, or Amharic, or Aramaic reading, can be measured by a much more lenient standard. Now, If you're looking for skeptics regarding Arabic on the pews, you don't have to look any further than me, right? As I've said many times in the past, I myself remain skeptical about Arabic appearing on the pews. But despite that, I still say that if there's any language on the pews, the strongest case so far has been for Arabic. And that's the challenge for the good doctor and his supporters. If we hold all languages to the same standard, which language has the strongest case? And with that, let's now return to the good doctor's most recent video related to the pews. And I want to pick this up at about an hour and 38 minutes into the video, in which Kelly discusses the claim that the Shahada, or part of the Shahada, might appear on the pews. Note that where this picks up, Kelly is in the midst of discussing the Bilali Diary, an Arabic text written by a slave in 19th century Georgia. So with that in mind, let's play the clip and fair use.
So before we read the second paragraph on page 598, I want you to listen closely to the words of the PBS staff from a Q&A session held on Clubhouse immediately following the premiere of the Black Church, This Is Our Story, This Is Our Song. This is where it really gets dicey. Listen with intelligence.
All right, I just want to interject here to make clear that he's going to play the voice of one of the producers of the PBS documentary, The Black Church, in which she's discussing what the Harvard linguist Boubacar Diakité felt he saw on the pews.
So I did just find the email. So the scriptures, the ones that we sent him of the pews, the side pews, it's like one that looks like a squiggly line is Muhammad is his messenger, and the other one that he translated was no God but Allah.
Now, the Henry Louis Gates staff said, according to Boubacar, that the pew in question, along with another pew, says Muhammad is his messenger and no God but Allah.
Okay, so at this point, we have a linguist from Harvard, Boubacar Diakité, affirming that a couple different Arabic phrases appear on the pews, one of which is La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. And from there, the good doctor is going to return to the Bilali Diary. Now, this will be a bit of a longer clip, so I'm going to play it at a slightly higher speed, but listen to his reasoning here and fair use.
Now let's read the second paragraph on page 598. It says, at the end of the section on washing, the diarist or copyist seemed to diverge from copying a text or recalling it. With folio 5R, he lapsed into his own brand of piety. Over and over, perhaps 7 times in the following 5 folia, he wrote, "O God, I bear witness that there is no God but God." Usually, he added to this phrase, "and Muhammad is the messenger of God." Now, is this strictly a coincidence that we see almost identical quotes from the Bilali Diary and what the PBS staff quoted? Is it strictly a coincidence that the quotes from the diary, "and Muhammad is the messenger of God," truncated to "Muhammad is his messenger," and "Oh God, I bear witness that there is no God but God," truncated to "no God but Allah"?
So, by asking if this is a coincidence, Kelly was trying to insinuate that something nefarious is afoot, that there's some sort of conspiracy. But what he failed to realize is that this juxtaposition between the Bilali Diary and the proposed reading for the pew, which was put forth by Boubacar Diakité, that this juxtaposition actually works against past appeals to history and the surrounding context. You see, these sort of arguments about what about history and what about the surrounding context previously came from Kelly's side, from people like Benaiah Israel and others. So consider this. An Arabic phrase which was proposed for the pews was also found among other slaves elsewhere in 19th century Georgia. So let's think about the significance of this. Let's compare the relevant Arabic phrase to Kelly's proposed Hebrew reading. The Arabic phrase, La ilaha illallah, is one of the most well-attested phrases in human history, and it was even found in the writings of a slave in 19th century Georgia, which is roughly the same time period and location in which the pews were marked. Meanwhile, Kelly's proposed string of characters, Yisrael Yom, in which Yisrael is spelled with 5 yods and a zayin, but no center aleph, and Yom is written with a regular mem rather than a mem sofit, that string of characters is completely ahistorical, and it's not found in any source. And so, of course, it isn't found among any writings produced by any slave in Georgia or anywhere else in the Americas. You see, Kelly and his cohort used to try to insist on appeals to history and surrounding context, arguing that what is more common in the surrounding environment should dictate how we interpret the pews. But notice how they utterly abandon that sort of reasoning here. Beyond that, Note that the good doctor and others in his circle used to insist on appeals to scholar. So let's also note that the Arabic phrase has been proposed by Boubacar Diakité, who was a linguist from Harvard. Meanwhile, Kelly's proposed string of characters has not been proposed by any linguist, any scholar, or any professor. In order for Kelly to pretend like there's a better case for that string of Hebrew characters than there is for the Arabic phrase, he would have to abandon not one, but two of his side's previous modes of argumentation. In short, he and his supporters have moved the goalposts. But whatever the case, at this point, one would be within their rights to ask where either of these alleged readings might be found on the pews. So let's get into that now. While I don't know for certain which pews Boubacar Diakité proposed readings for, I have said in the past that this pew has markings which look a bit like the Arabic phrase La ilaha illallah. However, if that was intended by the person who made those markings, it is arguably quite sloppy, quite different from how others might write that phrase. So let me color code the different words to make clear precisely which portions of the Arabic text correspond to which markings on that pew. And as you look at this, we should ask the question, what are the main weaknesses here? I would propose that there's at least three problems. First, what is supposed to be a lam and alif do not cross each other, as is typically the case when writing in Arabic. And here I'm referring to the red text and the blue text. Second, what is proposed to be an alif seems disconnected from what is proposed to be a lam. And third, the ha at the end of ilah and Allah they're open rather than taking the form of a typical loop in how, the final ha is typically written. And here I'm referring to the purple text and the green text. However, on the other hand, all these features can actually be found in different instances of handwritten Arabic. And to show this, I'd like to take a look at a handwritten letter that the Shi'i cleric, Grand Ayatullah Al-Sistani, who's based in Najaf in Iraq, a handwritten letter that was written by that Shi'i cleric in Iraq. And I'll share a link to this in the video description. So let's take a look at the text of his letter, which is written in Arabic, and I want to zoom in on two words in particular. First, note the word al-Islam at the top right of your screen. Notice that in the first instance of lam alif, the lam and alif do not cross, as might typically be the case. Rather, it seems like the lam is written and then the alif appears over the part of the lam which trails off to the left. So it looks more like this. Beyond that, notice that in the second instance of lam alif, the alif doesn't connect to the lam. And then let's switch to the word Allah at the bottom left of the screen. Notice that the final letter, the ha, is not a closed loop. Rather, it's open. In short, it looks more like this. So with all of these features in mind, if we return to the pew we were looking at, to make this proposed reading more clear, we only need to change the style to be a bit more like, for example, Sistani's writing, or his handwriting, where the final ha is open rather than a loop, and the lam alif does not cross. And perhaps so too, we can disconnect the alif from the lam. Now, again, one might argue that if this was intended as reading La ilaha illallah, then it's a sloppily written instance of such. Nonetheless, I'd say that it's at least a plausible reading, and it seems it was backed by a linguist from Harvard, that being Boubacar Diakité. But now we should turn to the question of where Kelly's proposed reading can be found. The good doctor proposed such for this pew. As I noted earlier, he's never attempted to highlight that pew, but he has offered a certain drawing, which I'll put above the relevant markings. And again, the good doctor claims this is Solitreo script, and that it reads Yisrael Yom, which he claims means Israel's day. At the top right of your screen, I've placed the relevant string of characters in the Solitreo and square scripts. And by square script, I mean the block letters, what's now the standard Hebrew script. And as I alluded to earlier, the relevant Hebrew words in that phrase are not written in those ways. The word for Israel is not spelled Yod Yod Zayin Resh Yod 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 Lamed. Rather, the correct spelling of Israel is spelled Yod Shin Resh Aleph Lamed. As for the second proposed word, Kelly has placed a regular mem at the end when it should be a final mem, a mem sofit, which in Solitreo is a circle. So if the words Israel and Yom were written correctly, they would look like this. Beyond that, there's an issue with the syntax. Kelly claims this proposed reading means Israel's day. But in Hebrew, when one noun is possessed by another noun, the noun which is possessed comes before the noun which possesses it, not after. In short, in order for this text to read along the lines of Kelly's proposed translation, the word order would have to be reversed. So with both a correct spelling and a correct syntax, the phrase should look like this. But Kelly's proposal has a more Germanic syntax, bringing us back to a fun question I've explored in a previous video. Does Kelly wish to propose that there's Yiddish on the pews? And how would Kelly distinguish his proposed phrase from Yiddish, right? But honestly and frankly, sadly, the reality is that not even a Yiddish speaker would spell Yisrael that way or write Yom with a normal mem rather than a final mem. But whatever the case, with those curious spellings and curious syntax in mind, I'd like to note another reading for this same pew, which is the Arabic phrase, Ilahinas, which means the God of mankind. This reading was proposed by 3 different scholars independently of each other. But Kelly and Brown invoked another Arabic professor who raised an objection which is worth recalling here. So I'm going to play 2 clips from this video in which they discuss the issue with the proposed reading having the sin in An-Nas touching the Aleph which precedes it. So here we go, and fair use.
The name of the surah 114 is Al-Nas. In Arabic, it looks this way. And of course, you, brother, and I think this is the sin. Am I correct here?
Yes, that's the last one. Yeah. So we start from right
right.
to left. Yes, sir.
Right. We read from right to left. So, and then you says the letters in the markings are not connected as they should in Arabic. A native speaker of Arabic wouldn't write it that way. It ends here in this particular letter. These two shouldn't be connected the way the hypothetical was presented. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, yeah, I think the last one, I would agree with it, because this letter right here that you showed, I'm sorry, I'm trying to use the arrow. The second letter, the kind of the one that goes up. That long or tall letter that goes high, goes up.
Right.
That's what we call a one-way connector. It's not supposed to be connected to what comes after it. So I agree with this person that you quoted here, that these two shouldn't be connected. So
right.
Yeah. So this one doesn't connect to this one. But
okay, so to understand that objection, look at the last letter in the yellow text, which is to say the letter all the way to the left. The way it appears on the pew, it actually looks like this, where what is proposed to be a sin is written over what is proposed to be an aleph, when really it should look like this, where the aleph and sin should be separate, right, rather than connected. Now, I would note that such overlap does happen in calligraphy, and I've shown examples of that before, and I would also argue that this sort of overlap can happen unintentionally or accidentally when written by a sloppy or unsteady hand. But recall that it was objected that a native Arabic speaker would not make such a mistake.
A native speaker of Arabic wouldn't write it that way.
And this is where the question of even scales comes in. Let's compare this proposed Arabic reading to Kelly's proposed Hebrew reading. For the Arabic reading, we have this objection. A native speaker of Arabic would not write the sin connected to an aleph which precedes it. Okay, fine. But if we're holding these two proposed readings to the same standard, we can ask a couple of related questions, like, would a native speaker of Hebrew spell Israel with 5 yods and a zayin, but no sin or aleph? Would a native speaker of Hebrew write the word yom with a regular mem rather than a mem sofit? And assuming Kelly's proposed translation is correct, which is to say assuming the writer intended to write Israel's day, would a native speaker of Hebrew have the word order like that, the word order reversed from typical Hebrew syntax? So if the argument is that a reading is disqualified if it has features implying mistakes a person educated in that language would not make, then that argument would disqualify Kelly's proposed reading. Now, one might want to try to salvage the Hebrew reading by saying that the author was under duress, or the author only had a shaky or rudimentary familiarity with Hebrew. But if that sort of explanation is applied consistently, it would undermine the objection to the Arabic reading. Note that the Arabic reading is judged as if written by someone well familiar with the language, while the Hebrew reading is held to a standard that doesn't require that. That's inconsistent. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not accusing that Arabic professor they spoke with, which is Yusuf Salhi. I'm not accusing him of having a double standard. Honestly, I would take it for granted that he didn't know what they were doing. They had him look at the proposed Arabic reading in a vacuum and, hold it to a high standard. Then they turned around and held the proposed Hebrew reading to a much more lenient standard, right? So it's not Yusuf Salhi's fault that they played this game, but this is nonetheless a game that they're playing where they're using uneven scales. And on a side note, now might be an appropriate time time to mention a humorous attempt that the good doctor made to defend his proposed spelling of Israel. As you watch this clip, keep your eye on the screen at the top left, as in that screen, Kelly holds up a certain book. And after the clip, I'll show a close-up of the book he held up. So fair use.
Well, this is Yisrael Yam, which means transliterates to Israel's day, Israel's time. That's what that portion of the pew, that's what it actually says. And some of you guys that may say, hey, a Z, Israel spelled with a Z. Yep, got plenty of sources, right? I just put this on the screen. Got plenty of sources.
So the book Kelly held up was The Chronicles of the Lodz Ghetto by Lucjan Dobroszycki. And he appealed to that book because it has instances of the word Israel being spelled with a Z in the Latin script, which is typical of Polish use of the Latin script. But that attempt is at best misleading, and honestly, at worst, it comes off as desperate, because when writing in the Hebrew script, not even Polish Jews spell Israel with 5 yods and a zayin. So no, this appeal to how Israel is spelled in Polish use of the Latin script does not justify the wild spelling Kelly has proposed for Israel in the Hebrew script. But I digress. Now, before I close this video, I want to make one last point, before I attempt to sum it all up. Regarding that proposed Arabic reading, Ilahi Nas, 2 scholars proposed a more expansive reading, An-Nas Ilahi Nas. Now, keep in mind that the phrase Ilahi Nas appears in the last chapter of the Quran, and the word which precedes Ilahi Nas in that chapter is the word An-Nas. So the letter immediately before Ilahi Nas in that Quranic chapter is a sin, which means that if the pew read more expansively, An-Nas Ilahi Nas, like in the 114th chapter of the Quran, the letter we should expect to see immediately before Ilahi is a sin. And coincidentally, perhaps amazingly, the marking immediately before what is marked here in red looks precisely like an Arabic scene. Now, admittedly, I personally find it a bit strained to try to place Alif Lam Nun Alif before that alleged scene, but still, that is an amazing coincidence that the marking immediately before what is alleged to be Ilahi Nas looks pretty much exactly like the Arabic character which immediately precedes that phrase in the Quran. Honestly, one might say that whatever the weakness of this more expansive reading may be, it seems to have the potential to explain more of the pew than Kelly's completely ahistorical string of characters does. But let's stop here and attempt to summarize the respective cases for Hebrew and Arabic on the pews which we've looked at. Honestly and bluntly, without mincing words, here's what the ultimate fact of the matter is. The proposed Arabic readings put forth what are among the most well-attested phrases in the history of writing. These phrases have even been found among the writings of slaves in the Americas. And while every proposed reading is open to dispute, these phrases have been proposed by multiple scholars independently of each other. Not all scholars agree, but the fact remains that these proposed readings have at least some scholarly support. Meanwhile, Kelly's proposed Hebrew reading is an ahistorical string of characters which is riddled with errors of spelling and syntax, and which no scholar has proposed. Unlike the multiple Arabic readings, Kelly's proposed Hebrew reading has no scholarly support whatsoever. So ultimately, we have to conclude that the case for Arabic is stronger. Whatever the weakness of the case for Arabic on the pews may be, it remains the strongest case of any language so far. And not only is it stronger than the case for Hebrew, but so too it's also stronger than the cases for other languages proposed by the church's website, such as Ge'ez, or Amharic, or Aramaic. No one has even proposed a single word in those other languages. Yet in an obvious double standard, an obvious example of uneven scales, those languages get promoted while Arabic gets denied. It's completely inconsistent, and some might be tempted to argue that this is an example of intellectual dishonesty. And on one final closing note, it's worth comparing this channel to the We Woke Now channel. No one is censored here. Anyone is welcome to post objections, including Kelly and his supporters. Meanwhile, over at the We Woke Now channel, one finds a heavily censored echo chamber, where critics are blocked and objections are deleted or stopped at moderation so as to prevent other viewers from seeing them. Just like the inconsistent standards, the efforts to prevent people from having a free and open dialogue in the comment sections of videos comes off as a tacit admission that the case for Hebrew or Aramaic or Amharic, etc., cannot compete on even terms with the case for Arabic. Honestly, that's what it looks like. And honestly, one has to wonder if Kelly finds protecting his brand is more important than having an open search for the truth. Food for thought. But that's it. I'll stop this video here.
You have been properly served.